A lot of students ask me whether or not they should be memorizing their speeches, especially in the early stages of their public speaking journey. And on this week's episode of Master Talk, I'll be giving my take on memorizing speeches. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all doing amazing. My name is Brendan. I'm the host of Master Talk, your go-to channel to mastering your talk, and today we're talking about memorizing speeches. So let's get into it. The first thing that I want to talk about is the differences between two types of speeches, spontaneous ones and prepared ones. In a spontaneous speech, let's say you're at a wedding, you're the best man for the wedding, and the groom comes up to you and asks you to give a speech. But he didn't tell you before the wedding that you had to give one. That's an example of a spontaneous speech, because you had no time to prepare and you weren't notified in advance that you had to give one. So you pretty much have to give one on the spot. A prepared speech, on the other hand, is when you are in the same situation where the groom asks you to give a speech, but he told you 2 weeks in advance to prepare something, to get ready, to do some research, and to make it amazing. That's an example of prepared speech. So obviously this video won't focus on spontaneous speeches, because how can you memorize a speech that you didn't prepare for in the first place, right? So in regards to prepared speeches, there are three things that I look at to determine whether or not I should be memorizing a speech. And spoiler alert, in almost 100% of situations, I never memorize speeches, okay? So it's only in very specific circumstances that I do. So just bear that in mind as I go through these three things. The first one, and this is the most important one, is this presentation going to substantially impact or alter my life or my career? The best example that I like to give is TED Talks. A lot of people use TED Talks to launch or jumpstart their career, and they only have one shot to give it on the main stage. So they need to make sure that if they knock it out of the park, their careers and their lives will change, because they'll get more speaking engagement, they'll make more money, and their products and services will be more well known. A great example of this is Dr. Jill Taylor, who has this amazing TED Talk that has over 50 million views on TED. She's been known to have practiced her TED Talk over 200 times. Crazy, right? And she did whatever it took to make sure that every single second she had in her pitch was very well utilized to her success. So in those types of situations, it makes perfect sense to memorize your pitch, because you want to make sure that every single word that comes out of your mouth is accurate and there's no filler words and everything is exactly how you want it. But in most circumstances, you don't want to be memorizing your pitch. Let's give another example. Most of the presentation you'll probably have are with colleagues when you explain like a project update, or maybe at school when you're giving a class presentation that isn't worth that many marks or that everyone does fairly well on. In those types of situations, I would much rather you prepare the speech but not memorize it. So you want to prepare like some key ideas, some key points that you want to make sure that you drive throughout the presentation, but you do not want to be memorizing word for word, because it's not worth the effort you're putting in. And honestly, I think it's a really good exercise for you to work on giving presentations without having to memorize them, because that will ultimately reduce your overall stress levels for any type of presentation you give. Which brings me to my second point, time constraints, especially going back to the TED Talk example. Most TED speakers, if not all of them, have less than 18 minutes to deliver their entire pitch, and they only have one shot. So in that type of situation where everything's on the line and they have a little time to give their speech and their essence up front, it's crucial that they memorize their speech, or at least at the most that they should memorize a significant portion of it to make sure that everything's said within the allotted time. But let's take a different example, which is in most situations. Let's say I'm giving a workshop on public speaking. They generally last anywhere between an hour or 2 hours. I won't get kicked out of the classroom if I go over a minute. I won't get kicked out of the classroom if I go under time. It's a lot more relaxed of an environment, and my life isn't on the line. So that tends to be 90 to 95% out of all my presentations, as I'm assuming yours should be as well. So in those types of situations, you definitely want to prepare your speech, as I do most of them, but you don't want to memorize them. Like, I generally memorize my tips and tricks, like, mastering silences, mastering ums and ahs, and the tricks, but I don't memorize exactly the story I bring into each of those tips or how I interact with my audience. So similarly, As your length of time goes down in your pitches, let's say you have to give a 3-minute pitch, then you're probably more incentivized to memorize the pitch, right? And the third thing is your level of comfort. If you're really just starting out as a public speaker and giving prepared speeches or spontaneous ones without having to memorize them, without memorizing them, scares you so much, then I honestly recommend that you should memorize them at the beginning if that makes you more comfortable. And then as you become more confident as a public speaker, as you start mastering silences, ums and ahs, and you start to be more confident on stage, then one day you won't need to memorize your speeches anymore. So let's give a timeline here so we understand what we're talking about. The first stage of a public speaker is you'll probably have cue cards, you'll probably use that to support your presentations, and it's perfectly fine if you just read every single word off the cue card as your speech. Then the second step will be without the cue card. So what most people will do is they'll memorize the entire thing and try and give out word for word without using the cue card. Then after, you'll transition to giving general ideas. Okay, these are the 3 points I need to remember, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to talk about them a bit. And then you'll become an expert on your topic, and then you won't need any of that. You'll just need to know general pointers, and you'll be off to the races. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that like button as well if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content. If you know one person that's struggling and wondering about whether or not they should be memorizing their speech or not, send them this video so that they'll be one step closer to mastering their talk. Thank you, everyone. I hope you're all having a great week, and see you next time. Bye-bye.